Today, I wanted to see how some cheap 35mm film stocks would handle a portrait and fashion shoot. Let's take a look. So recently here in England, we were finally legally allowed to meet up with other people outside of our own household for purposes other than exercise. And so I wanted to get straight back in to shooting some portraits. And I had another new 35mm camera that I wanted to try out. And that camera was the Canon EOS 3. Now, I'm hoping that at a later date I'll do a full review looking at the Canon EOS 3 and talking in depth about the camera, but I'd like to use it on a few more shoots before I make that video. So instead, today we're going to talk about my first impressions of shooting with the camera and also take a look at how some cheap Kodak 35mm film stocks look for portrait and fashion work. Let's jump straight into some of the shoot and then I'll talk about the film stocks and the camera a little bit more.
It's not the mighty Mississippi, not the sunshine in LA. It's not a snow-capped Rocky Mountain on a warm summer day. It's not the glow of a full moon shining in the night. There's nothing grand about a canyon that holds a candle to your sight. The most beauty that I've seen, it's you, it's you. It's not a trophy on the mantle or that raise that was overdue. It's not a wish that has been granted or being freed by truth. It's not a winning scratch-off ticket, never needing more. It's not getting through the hard times and being better than before. Nothing beats the feeling, so nothing else will do. The best thing that's ever happened is...
So as you saw, I just went for a little walk with my good friend Carmela once again, and I put 2 rolls of film through the EOS 3. One of those being Kodak Gold 200 and the other being Kodak Colorplus 200. Now, both of these stocks are generally considered as the more budget options that Kodak offer compared at least to the more premium offerings of Portra and Ektar, and you can pick up a roll of 36 exposures of those 2 film stocks for £6 and £4.50 respectively, which is pretty much half the cost of the more expensive Portra, at least at the moment, which is more commonly used for portrait work because of the way that it renders skin tones and it just gives a very natural look. But with that being said, I was fairly impressed with the results that I got from both the Gold and the Colorplus rolls. I did obviously edit the images. I wanted the whole shoot to have that sort of golden and warm, sort of golden hour sunset look to it, matching the video clips that I shot with the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro. So the colors aren't exactly what I got from the scan, but I was able to edit them pretty closely to the point that I wanted to. I've also shot quite a lot of medium format portraits recently, and so have been a little bit, I guess you'd say, spoiled with the quality of negatives that I've been getting from the likes of my RZ67, so they're not comparable to that, but at around 15p an image, I was pleasantly surprised at what I got back. As for the Canon EOS 3, I picked up this camera because I already owned some Canon EF lenses, and so it made sense to me that this be the body that I pick up. It's a fairly modern film camera compared to a lot of what I've shot on the channel at least. In fact, I think it's the only film camera that I've shot with to date that was released after the year that I was born, and so I was intrigued to see how the shooting experience differed to other older and more manual film cameras that I've shot on the channel, like my Canon A1. Now, obviously when shooting film, there's no sensors or anything like that involved, and so the only determining factor on the quality of the image is the film stock chosen and the lenses through which the image is projected. And obviously the Canon EF lens lineup is just incredibly well known and has some amazing offerings, such a wide scope of famous and high quality lenses. So with the EOS 3, the only thing that I really wanted to evaluate was how easily it allowed me to create the images that I wanted to, because I knew the stock of lenses that the Canon EF mount has will be around and will stand the test of time. And on the whole, I really enjoyed shooting with the EOS 3. Having used Canon DSLRs in the past, it felt like a very similar experience to that, and the layout of the camera felt very similar. So that probably helped me out in terms of learning the ergonomics and the handling of the camera pretty quickly. I used aperture priority for the shoot to test out the camera's built-in metering, and in general, I'd say that it handled some very contrasty situations pretty well. I did override the manual reading of the DX codes of the film, so I did expose them about a stop over and overexpose the image purely just so they had that extra bit of latitude in the shadows. The only thing that I wasn't totally sold on with the camera was the eye-controlled autofocus. Now, the technology behind the autofocus system it's incredible. It's just mind-blowing. It's the only camera that I've used that will evaluate where my eye is looking and choose that focus point as where it sets its focus. On the whole, it worked, I would say, fairly averagely. Probably 50% of the time or so, it chose just the perfect focus spot on the first try, and it was like it was reading my mind. But some other times it would choose a nearby focus spot, but not the perfect one, and so I'd have to refocus and recompose, and it just got a little bit fiddly at times, and I felt like I'd probably be quicker using a more traditional autofocus system. I did only calibrate the eye focus system once, and I did that indoors as well, even though the shoot was outdoors. And I know that the more you calibrate the system to your eye, supposedly the more accurate it will become. So I'm planning to have another shoot with the EOS 3 soon, and I'm going to calibrate it in a few different lighting scenarios, both indoor and outdoor, and I'll see if that works just any better, which hopefully it will do. But I mean, I can only imagine what the technology would be like if they carried it on into their modern digital cameras and carried on developing it, because for the time it feels like it must have been so far ahead of any other camera that was released, even if it did feel at times a little bit gimmicky. I did also find that a few times, even when I thought the camera had selected the perfect autofocus point, the image came out a little bit out of focus still, and generally it tended to be that it had focused, I feel, a few inches, maybe even closer to a foot at times, closer to me than it should have. Now, potentially that was just user error or just a product of shooting with a shallow depth of field on my 50mm lens that I used, but it did render a few of the images pretty unusable even just for the web. But the majority were plenty sharp, at least for posting on YouTube, even for a cheap film stock. And the shooting experience as a whole, I'd say was a pretty pleasant one, and I'm looking forward to getting out there and taking some more images with the camera.
Looking for an honesty I couldn't find in nobody. Love to bring home with me, then summer gave me you.
You absolutely can take at least what I would say are some decent portrait shots on cheap film stocks, at least cheap compared to most. I still prefer the likes of Portra 400 and 160 for portrait work, but if you're on a budget, these cheap film stocks produce absolutely usable results, even if they're never going to replace the more expensive likes of Portra. Just a fairly quick video today. I wanted to share that shoot with you and just briefly touch on the Canon EOS 3, and as I said, I'm hoping to have a load more shoots with it in the near future, and so if a full review of the camera is something that you would be interested in, please do let me know down in the comments below. And of course, anytime that I do shoot with a camera and I like the results, I will share them on here, absolutely. Just on a little side note, if you liked some of the video from this shoot, please do check out my last video. I purchased a new cinema camera for my video work that I do myself, and I made a video just going over my first impressions and thoughts of shooting with the camera. I'll put a little card up the top and of course a link to the video down in the description as well. But that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, there is a like button down there. Please feel free to hit that. It really helps me out. And of course, if you enjoy my work and my content, do feel free to subscribe if you want to see some more in the future. Stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you in the next one.